The Business of Benefits is your no BS, no sales guide to real solutions.
No gimmicks, just the truth about how to take control, transform your benefits, and care for your most valuable asset, your people.
If you're tired of the same old sales pitch and you're ready to rethink your benefits, this podcast is for you. The truth is out there. Are you ready to hear it? Today on The Business of Benefits, we have Stephanie Koch of Hendry Marine. Wow, is all I'm going to say. You need to check out this episode. If you're in the benefits industry, you already know who this queen is. But if you aren't, and you're in HR or you're a CFO or a CEO, you are going to glean some incredible insights on what it means to be a strategic HR that's adding real value to the bottom line of a company, but also, as most HR want, to really impact the lives of the people that they serve within their organizations. So Steph is going to go through the different periods of her career that helped her transition into this more strategic role. And she's going to tell us about some of the financial impacts that she's had on the program when she took ownership of it at Hendry about 5 years ago. And then she's going to end by giving us her advice to all the HR, the CFOs, and the CEOs listening on how to be bold, how to take steps in the right direction to finally get control of your healthcare spend. Let us know what you think. Welcome to the Business of Benefits. I am your host, Chelsea Ryckis, here today with my friend and industry colleague, Stephanie Koch. Steph, do you want to give us a background on, obviously I know you really well, huge fan, but do you want to give our listeners a background of who you are and your unique position in the benefits industry?
Sure. So I'm a big fan of yours, you know that, and I'm very excited to be here. So I am the Director of Human Resources for Hendry Marine Industries, and I've been there about 5 years. But I've actually been working in HR since 1996.
Wow.
So I was in my 20s when I started in an HR position and worked for different organizations. And in each organization, I slowly evolved into learning more about HR. And as I got more accustomed to learning about benefits specifically, then I was invited to sitting in renewal meetings and talking with, the carriers or the broker. And, I do remember wondering this math doesn't add up. I didn't really understand it, but I didn't understand enough about healthcare,
right?
To really know what was wrong. But again, there's an evolution in everyone's career. So I kept progressing and getting more responsibility at the other companies I worked for.
Well, I have a quick question on kind of the evolution of your understanding of the healthcare industry. So you mentioned that you started getting invited into these renewal discussions with carriers and brokers, and you kind of knew something wasn't right, that the numbers didn't add up, right? And I find that really interesting because I think inherently a lot of human resources, CFOs, CEOs feel the same way, where they're sitting in these meetings and they're like, but this doesn't really make sense, but I've heard the same thing over and over and I trust this person and healthcare sucks. So tell me a little bit about we call it the big lie, right? Do you feel like you believed it for a long time? And why did you believe it? And then what made you stop believing it?
So that's a really great point. So as HR professionals, I'm fortunate to have passed my SPHR, and I have other credentials. I'm actually a licensed healthcare agent.
Look at her LinkedIn, y'all, and see the letters. I saw you, I was tagging you in something the other day and I'm like, dear God, how many accreditations does this woman have? But it's impressive.
Well, thank you. But as an HR professional, we aspire to get certified with SHRM and HRCI. But when I look back now, I realize that there really is no formal education for HR professionals other than high level information about offering, competitive benefits for recruiting and retention. And we understand all that. But going back to your question, so I would sit in the meetings, and this is when I worked with a company that had 750 employees. We were fully funded, and that's when I really started getting more involved and sitting in renewal meetings. And we were with a broker at the time. But what was interesting, and I think back now, is we chased numbers or a new broker every year or every 2 years because we were trying to get to a result that was financially affordable and sustainable.
So it was like a quoting game.
Correct.
So I also call this, for any sensitive ears, this is your warning, spread shitting.
Yes.
Right? Where
That
it's
is
just
spread
like
shitting.
people just come in with spreadsheets and they spread shit all over you instead of actually adding value, right?
Yeah. So that is so funny. I love that. I'm going to use that spread shitting.
You're welcome.
So that is very true of that particular company. And I do remember also that I was sitting in a meeting with one of the bukas, and it was someone who was talking during our renewal meeting. And we're like, well, what is this manual adjustment number? Or what is this? Or what is that? And something that Donovan has said and you have said is, well, the claims are the claims. Right.
For those of you listening in the car, Steph and I both just used, what are these called? Bunny
Air
ears?
quotes?
Yeah,
Air
air quotes, bunny ears.
Yeah.
Claims are the claims. Nobody, like, we don't actually say that in a way that's like, we believe that, just so everybody knows, but I'll let you explain it.
So, but I did at the time because at the time I didn't know any better, but still I was curious.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to now 2013, I go to a company as the VP of HR and they're self-funded with a buka. And I was like, well, I've never worked in self-funding before. And I always thought it was really scary. But my thought was, well, this is a way for me to learn something new, to progress in my position and hopefully add more value to the new company I was going to. And it was interesting because while they were self-funded, and we had a group of about 450 employees, maybe 600 cover lives, and despite doing all the things that it was recommended to do by our broker at the time, the moment came in 2016 when we got an 18% increase. Now, what I didn't mention, the demographics were like late 30s, maybe early 40s. So
young.
Then it's like, okay, well, essentially it doesn't make sense. Like, you know, it didn't feel warranted. But I also want to say that going back to self-funding, I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. You're not doing anything different.
In the ASO model.
Well, yes.
Right, with the buka, which, by the way, can you tell everybody, because this show is for employers, what buka stands for?
So buka is Blue Cross, United, Cigna, and Aetna. So, you know, the main players in the healthcare market. And really, that's what I cut my teeth on. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was when I got to the other company, I thought, okay, well, self-funding in that model didn't look or
Very
feel any different.
Right? Yeah.
And we also got some data. It wasn't like we weren't getting any like we were before.
Right.
So really in the fully funded space, we got no data and someone is showing up once a year saying, hey, by the way, you're having an increase, but we have no way to validate that. So that made no sense.
Right.
But now going self-funded.
With a carrier,
one of the big carriers, you know, it's still the big lie because you still don't have access to a lot of data. And truth be known, I loved the broker we were working with.
Yeah.
So it was interesting when we got that 18% renewal with one of the bukas. Some of the people on our executive team actually went to I think it was like a benefit like symposium. And this is the part is interesting because they came back and said to me, hey, we learned about this new program. It's called reference-based pricing. And we think we're going to explore it and probably have to make a change because this is not sustainable.
Yeah. Because,
you know, now I understand that the 18% compounds year after year, and it's not a deal at all.
No. So I want to back up a little bit. I want to touch on two things. I want to touch on the fact, why is it restrictive to be, I want to go deeper into why it's restrictive to be self-funded in the ASO model, which means that you're working with one of the bukas. And then the second thing I want to touch on is you highly favoring your broker and just talk through what I think a lot of HRs deal with, which is, but I really like this person, even if they're not necessarily delivering results. So before we go into that, I just want to clarify for any employers listening, Steph nailed it on the head when she said that if you go self-funded with a carrier, you will get more data than you did fully insured.
Yep.
However, remember there's 4 pieces to every health plan. There's a network, there's a PBM, there's a third-party administrator paying and processing claims, and then there's stop-loss insurance. in that ASO model, the carrier still owns all 4 pieces. So the real, like, getting data is super exciting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't do anything about it, for example, you see a high cost drug come through and you're like, wow, that's a $50,000 a month drug. That's very expensive for the plan. I wonder if I can go to the PBM and find a creative solution. If you're in that ASO model, there's absolutely no way that you're
Right.
going to have creative solutions because they're getting the rebates off of those drugs. They control the pharmacy. They want you to spend as much money as
Right.
possible. So I wanted to I know you know all this, but just for our employers listening, it's a step in the right direction, but you can go much further and have much more control in terms of pulling levers for actually containing cost and access to better data.
So it's so interesting because, I speak all over the country and I speak at conferences and I do a lot of podcasts and webinars. And there are 2 things I never thought I'd ever say in my entire career. One, yes, I'll speak in public and talk about healthcare.
Right.
And the second thing is, God, I love healthcare strategy. I mean, it was the one thing that every year I dreaded
Mm-hmm.
because every year the broker would come in with the what is it, the spreadsheet?
Oh, the spreadsheeting.
The spreadsheeting. And you'd have to pick the best of the worst scenario
Yeah.
and then figure out how you're going to basically polish up this message to your employees.
So they don't hate you.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we got this great deal. We only got like a 10% increase. And now, unfortunately, we had to make some plan design changes. That is the worst situation to be in as an HR person.
Yeah.
But thank God, when I finally decided to become open-minded, and I know we're going to talk about
Yes,
that,
we're getting there.
but I realize how much, more valuable I could have been had I been more open-minded back then.
Right. So how did that relationship and, whether this has happened multiple times in your career, or just that one scenario where like you really, really liked the person that you hired,
Mhm.
but they were not necessarily delivering results. How like I said, I think a lot of HRs, CFOs, CEOs find
Mhm.
themselves in that position, whether it's a friend or a golfing buddy or just somebody they care about. It's easy to make excuses for those that we really care about.
Absolutely. I hear it all the time too.
So, like, what's your advice? I mean, obviously, I could take the fiduciary conversation and it's like, just do better, have a prudent
Yeah.
decision-making process, benchmark the shit out of these people. But, like, on a personal level, like, how did you handle that? Did you struggle with it? Do you still struggle with it?
So I'm a lot different in my career now than I was back then.
Okay.
This is almost 9, 10 years later.
Right.
So back then I did struggle with it because the people we were working with, they were brilliant.
Mhm.
They were very savvy in the healthcare space. And I admire them to this day. So I have nothing but great things to say about them as people.
Yeah.
But delivering what we needed at that time to build the sustainable healthcare plan strategy, that wasn't there.
Right.
And it was very difficult because on a personal note, I was actually going through a divorce at the time
Mhm.
and it felt like I was getting
More losses.
Yeah. So it was like 2 divorces, right?
Ugh, yeah.
Is that TMI?
No, girl. Married twice here. Second one's
Yeah.
a charm.
Yeah. Well, so it was really difficult because I really admired these people and it felt like a true breakup.
Yeah.
But as professionals, we maintained contact and,
Mhm.
like I said, I think they're wonderful people. Now, what was interesting was, I can't remember if I told you this, but when part of the executive team came back from that benefit symposium and talked to me about this strategy,
Right, RBP. Mhm.
reference-based pricing, I looked at them and I said, hell no, we are not doing that. You guys are crazy. It is not going to work.
So tell me why. Like, were you fed like bullshit basically from people in the industry that's like, this is so hard. This is going to be terrible. It's super disruptive. Or was it just you being like, I can't do anything more? Like, I'm not learning something new. Like, what was it that made you be like, hell no? I'm curious if you were fed this information or if it was just like an instinctual reaction.
It was instinctual because, again, like I said, we're not, as HR professionals, trained formally in healthcare strategy as its own independent, curriculum.
Right.
So my instinct was no, because as an HR professional, I want to protect my employees' best interest.
Mhm.
I didn't know enough about reference-based pricing or what this model would look like, so I was scared.
Yeah.
So, of course, my initial response was no.
Mhm.
But
What pushed you over the edge? And then also, spoiler alert, Hendry Marine has been very successful with reference-based pricing, especially under the leadership of Steph. So we know that the tide changed somewhere along the way. What
right.
was the moment?
Well, this was, again, back at my last company. And that's what's so funny about this whole storyboard. So it was more of an awakening for me because I thought, okay, well, this is something that we as leaders have to agree upon. And I understand it's a financial issue, an 18% increase, it
No, it's a lot.
is huge
Yeah.
on a family-owned business. So it was that point I said, okay, well, I need to be open-minded,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also a show me person.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying, but I need you to show me how this is going to work. So one of the ways they did that was one of my and there were only two of us in the department. I want to say that too, because that was the other fear was, do we have enough support? Can we handle this?
Right.
So it was, okay, we have an EOB, an explanation of benefits, and it was run through our BUCA plan. And I can't remember exactly what the cost was, just say $3,200. And then they ran it through the scenario of reference-based pricing.
Mm-hmm.
It was like $300.
Yeah.
So it was that moment I started realizing that was the big lie.
Mm-hmm.
The light bulb goes on,
Mm-hmm.
and then I start understanding more of the mechanics of the plan
Right.
and why the system is misaligned.
Yeah.
And really, it's sick care, and that's problematic.
Yeah. And so at that point, you saw the finances, you saw the human impact, because the other thing that I think a lot of people, especially employers, might not realize is when you go into these more cost creative or cost containment strategies that sound more creative, there's always an assumption that like this is going to be bad for employees or in some way it's going to be worse for them, right? What actually happens is the opposite. Health outcomes dramatically increase when you have access to data. You can steer employees to high quality facilities, high
Right.
quality physicians. Like we've seen in our book of business, I mean, the data on readmissions and infections and all sorts of things post surgery go way down when you're able to say to an employee, hey, you can go here or you could go here where they don't have medical malpractice lawsuits and all sorts of crazy shit going on.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And the other thing too, and I realized it when at that moment, I said, oh my God, my employees have been overpaying for all of their services during the time I was administering all these plans.
And you had no idea.
I had no idea
Exactly.
because there was no transparency. You don't have and I know the word transparency is used a lot, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
So like what company buys something without a line by line description or cost for something?
Right.
So you're basically writing a check.
You know, it's
every
funny.
month.
Donovan says this all the time. So in any healthcare plan, there will be 18 on average, 18 claims per employee. Now that's not obviously spread
Yeah.
out evenly, right? Like you have dependents, you've got frequent people who are using the plan all the time, and then
Yeah.
people who won't use it at all, right? But 18 claims per year per person, per employee. That is likely the largest area of accounts payable in a business.
Yeah.
Right? 18 times 300 insured or whatever it is. I mean, that's a ton of invoices.
It
and
is.
if you think about it, like that's where the concept of healthcare financing comes in, right?
Mhm.
Like we are financing these 18 claims per employee per year. How do we pay less for those claims? That's the only question that employers should be asking. If I know I'm going to have 18 claims per person on the plan, how do I pay less for those 18 claims?
Well, I think there's also a perception that if you're not using a BUCA, it's not good.
Right.
When in fact, it's the exact opposite. And
Right.
it took me, a long time to learn that. And that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this wherever.
Share with us your story about Hendry Marine. So and you don't have to tell us absolutely everything, but generally like what the program looks like, some of the successful metrics, how it's evolved over the years.
So I got there in December 2019, and it was interesting and coincidental because they actually were on the same reference-based pricing plan that I had just left with my prior company.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think they thought I was nuts when I told them. I'm like, oh, I love that plan.
I actually know this.
Yeah, I know this. And so it was a match made in heaven. And, what was very rewarding to me and empowering was when I got there and they knew that I understood I was basically handed the healthcare plan
Mm-hmm.
to handle it. And I believe that was the first time in my career that I had the ability to
Dude,
manage.
ownership.
Correct.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed right away, and again, it's December, so the decisions are made for 2020. Well, they kept the CVS Caremark PBM inside of the plan because we all know change is hard.
Yeah.
So you have to be methodical about it. And I knew that was the first thing I was going to change come next open enrollment. So, employers that are listening, this is also something I know too, is, if you're afraid to make a change, have your PBM, your pharmacy benefits looked at, because we save 30%.
Right. And the reason Steph is recommending that is because it has zero employee impact, essentially. Like
Correct.
they can, all of that, the financial impact is happening behind the scenes. Employees are going to Walgreens, CVS,
Yeah.
wherever they decide they
Yeah.
want to go, their local
It's
pharmacy.
the same.
It's the exact same
Yeah.
experience for employees, but the financials work a lot different when you're working with a fiduciary, pass-through, transparent PBM.
Exactly. And that's important as well. But, we did things like we did a dependent care audit,
Mhm.
and that was huge because, we found out that there were over 30 people on our healthcare plan that were not considered legal dependents.
Wow.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that part of the story. That's
so
crazy.
we saved about over $100,000 there.
Wow.
So we switched the PBM, we do the dependent care audit, and we use the third party.
Yeah.
Yes. We're not going to play,
Yeah.
police, people's documents. So we did that. When we incorporated the new pharmacy benefit manager, we were able to incorporate specialty funding, alternate funding, international pharmacy.
Yeah.
So essentially the benefits kept getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a matter of you as the employer communicating to the employees,
Mm-hmm.
Giving them better options.
Yeah.
And really your organization has the opportunity to save millions of dollars when working with somebody like you and Donovan, like who are strategic when they look at the healthcare.
How much do you think, maybe you know this number offhand, maybe you don't, but over the last few years, like the decisions that you've made
Mhm.
leading this charge, do you know the financial impact?
Well, I do know from a build charge perspective, we've saved almost $24 million from 2019 to the present time.
Wow.
So $24 million off of build charges. We've, in 2021, when we started making plan changes, when you go on to a plan like reference-based pricing or another, type of self-funded plan, when you have savings, you have the ability to reinvest it
Yes.
into the plan or whatever it is you want to
Yes.
do. But we had $1 million in surplus in 2021. That's never happened
Right.
in my
Yeah.
whole career. Like,
Well,
we have money left over.
Right. Like, what
Like-
are we going to do with all this money?
Yeah.
Like, that's an HR's dream.
Well, and the other thing too is like, okay, I know as a matter of fact that we are contributing to the bottom line. We are no longer a cost center. We are helping to become a profit center for the
Yeah.
company. And, we're not costing the company money because we're adding value,
Right.
not only to the company, but the balance of the employees as well.
I want to pause there because I think that is such a powerful message for human resources that are
Mhm.
listening. If you are in the manager role or even a director role, but maybe you're not quite being taken as seriously as maybe somebody like Steph that's literally handed the reins of an entire, the second or third largest
For
expense
the
of
first
the company.
time in my career.
Correct.
And
But the reason that you still have the ownership of the program that you have is because you've added the value that you've had. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that I'm hearing from your story that if I were in HR would be inspiring to me is, change is scary and learning new things is scary and you're overwhelmed and there's all sorts of reasons not to. But when you start walking this path and you add financial value and health outcome value to the company,
Right.
Look at you now. You're speaking all over the country. You're winning awards left and right. You're the employer of choice in your region. And it's all because you had the courage to go from being here to being strategic. So, would you add anything to that? Would you give any piece of advice to anybody that's trying to figure out how to kind of bridge that gap?
Well, I was thinking about this, and it's really like pick your hard, right?
Totally.
What's harder? Is it harder to go in front of your employees and say, I'm sorry, you have another increase and your plan is going to suck more next year?
Yeah.
Or I have to learn as an HR professional, I have to learn something new so I can add more value to my company and my employees and think outside the box. But for me, having the ability to have such an impact is so rewarding. And I'm so grateful that I went through the difficult stuff to get to where I am today.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is that when you're on these type of healthcare plans, number one, your employees, at least in my experience, they are getting more advocacy.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
They're not calling like a 1-800 number
no,
and going through like
a call queue, and then
yeah.
good luck talking to the same person.
We've all seen the denial rates
Yeah.
of BUCAs for claims and getting through that process too.
Exactly. I mean, listen, nothing is perfect,
Yeah.
right? But it's also difficult going from United to Cigna or Cigna to Aetna. There's always a quote unquote disruption,
Yes.
right? So again, choose your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Choose what you think is right for the balance of the company, the employees. But, you know, I'm going to choose this all day long because it's better for my employees and the organization as a whole.
Something we talk about at Ethos Benefits is the problem solution cycle, right? So it's like, imagine this this picture, like a moving graphic, and it's like the problem, solution, and it goes and it gets, it's like a spiral, and it's getting smaller in the middle. And, you know, to your point, nothing's perfect. Problems are going to happen. Problems are going to happen in fully insured plans, like 18% increases every year. And problems are going to happen in self-funded health plans, like a provider doesn't accept reference-based pricing. Okay, a hospital doesn't want to negotiate with us.
But you can problem solve in those situations.
And that, the problem solution cycle, you figure out the solution, right? The problem isn't as big as a 20% increase. So
again, choose your hard.
Choose your hard. Yes. I love the choose your hard. I love the problem solution cycle because we can sit here all day long and you know, I have conversations with a lot of HRs and I feel for them a lot of the times because sometimes their opinions aren't valued enough.
Right.
They're the ones that have to implement whatever decisions are being made by other people. Right. And then there's sort of this, I don't know if animosity is the right word, but there's sort of this like resentment maybe of the program that they have to implement that may be harder or different than what they're used to because they weren't sitting at the table making the decision. So whenever we get into a C-suite, I'm like, no, we need the HR manager here. We need the benefits manager here. You want their buy-in. They should be on the committee. Like my goal is always to try to help if they don't already have that strategic position to like help bridge them and get them there. But then, you know, you meet other HRs that are like you and they know their shit. Not that the others don't. It's just that there's a learning curve that everybody goes through.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, every organization prioritizes HR differently.
Yes.
Which is really unfortunate because in HR, we're managing the largest asset, which is the employees. Yeah. Like, let's get that one thing straight.
For sure.
And you know, organizations that don't put value or stake into bringing HR along, you know, that's really short-sighted because we have the opportunity to help make very informed decisions, you know, help recruit for the right people to help make the company more profitable. So there are so many things that we're balancing all the time.
For sure.
And companies that don't see that, you know, it's very unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. And so another question I have for you, obviously reference-based pricing had massive financial and positive health outcomes for employees, right? If you had to choose just one other program that you've implemented in the last few years that's had a substantial impact, which one would you want to tell other employers about?
So this actually is I would say close to my favorite project I've ever done in HR. So when we had that, I'll say it again. We had a surplus in 2021 of $1 million.
$1 million.
$1 million. So we have the surplus and we're doing a mid-year review. And I notice in looking at the, you know, data, because again, we're getting data. We know what's going on. We know, you know, where the money is being spent as far as like allocations for certain issues that we're having in the workforce from a medical standpoint. But one of the things I noticed was we only had a 15% utilization of our preventative wellness benefit. So going back to Hendry Marine, a little bit about our company demographic, we have 300 employees. We're at the Port of Tampa, but 80% of the employees we have are men, late 40s, early 50s. So when I see that 15% utilization
That's
for
scary.
preventative wellness, my mind automatically says, oh my God, we're going to have major catastrophic claims or worse.
Right.
So it was at that moment we as a company decided we needed to get access to primary care.
Mm-hmm.
So I was walking around a conference, the HR Florida conference, a couple months later, and I ran into Walk On Clinic. And what's so funny is Mike Tauber from Walk On Clinic still tells this story because I'm not one, if I go to a conference, I don't usually call a vendor right away when I get back.
Right.
But I believed in what they were doing so much. I called him when I got back. I said, we need to have a meeting. And, they were on site by January. We had that implemented.
Wow.
So we believed in it so much. We believed in bringing on-site care to the employees because at least in our population, we were concerned that they obviously were not getting the care they needed.
Right.
The only way to make it accessible, we felt, was to bring it on-site.
Yep.
And that 15% went up to over 40% in the first year. We had people that, found out they had life-threatening illnesses that they didn't know.
Yep.
And, the ROI of making that accessible for the employees and their family members on company time at
Right.
no cost
That's incredible.
has been such a great recruiting and retention tool.
Oh, I bet.
And think about productivity.
Yeah.
We would be losing 4 hours, 8 hours.
Yeah.
If they had to leave to go to the doctor.
And then the financial impact for those
Mhm.
that maybe aren't putting two and two together. When you catch something catastrophic early in the preventative stage,
Yeah.
I mean, that's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of claim spending saved. So that's, if you're not familiar with why this program has an ROI, that's how the ROI works.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more, employers listening, about Walk On Clinic, we actually had the owner, Chris Yarn, on the podcast, I want to say 3 or 4 episodes ago, and he kind of went into the whole how the on-site direct primary care works. But Hendry Marine is one of the best examples I've seen of that model working. And the cool thing is there's employers that will bring that model once a month, once a week, once a year, even, to their employees. You've really standardized it. They're there twice a week. Is that right?
They're there twice a week. And, to us, healthcare or health of our employees is not an event.
Right.
It's not flu shot season.
Yeah.
It is all year round where we are wanting to take care of the employees and their family members.
Yeah.
And the ROI, like I said, far exceeded, our out of pocket.
Right.
So it's really just been a tremendous success, and we're just really happy they're there. But they're there 2 days a week. And what I love about that project is because we have data, we're able to know what lever to pull. Like,
Right.
we have 10% of our population are diabetic. So we have a focused plan with the clinic to work on any of our members that have diabetes, getting them in a whole person program to take care of them, So
It's amazing.
it's evolving and keeps evolving. It doesn't stop.
And I think what, at least my clients, and I know you are on board with this too, like, employers want to take care of their people. I don't meet a lot of employers that are like, meh, I don't really care about the health of my number one asset. That's never it. It's always there's an existing relationship in place that maybe can't bring this to the table. It's always like something else. It's never that they don't care about their people and their
Right.
health. But look what happens when you put strategy and giving a shit together. Like, you are that perfect example.
Well, I think I had to get out of my own way,
Mhm.
back 9, 10 years ago. Like, once I realized that I would have been the one preventing the company from making progress, that's when I got on board.
Right.
And I was like, I need to learn this. Like,
And now, after having done this for so long, you've seen it literally saves lives, and which is, I know,
Yes.
part of why I've heard you tell stories. I've seen you cry on stage telling them, like,
Mhm.
through the programs, you've literally saved employees' lives. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So other than pick your hard, be bold, like, don't be afraid, do you have any other words of advice for employers that might be considering taking this step and walking the path to, like, a data-driven, transparent health plan?
So I will say this again, I know we said about hard decisions, but one of the hard decisions is really evaluating who you're working with as a broker advisor.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much from like you and so many people in the industry over the last couple of years. And I think about the brokers and advisors that keep bringing the same solutions, like the definition of healthcare insanity,
Yeah.
right? So they're the ones that they profit more when your company is spending more money. And there's something really wrong with that model.
Yeah.
Right. So they keep bringing solutions for Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna. The more the company's premiums go up, the more they make. Well, conversely, what you should be doing is working with, an insurance advisor, broker. And I think you talk about, this is where I learned a lot of this, is you want to work with someone who is going to, basically put a guarantee on your organization saving money. And you really need to look at yourself in the mirror and decide, well, as a fiduciary, companies have to,
Right.
right? They have to really evaluate or should reevaluate their broker insurance advisor every couple years.
Yep.
But those are things that are very important. And I know that I hear it a lot, oh, my brother-in-law is our broker. Well, I'm sorry, your brother-in-law is probably screwing you because if he's getting you nice gifts, you're paying for them anyway.
Well, and between the NHL tickets and the golfing trips and the steak dinners,
that doesn't
for
impress
HR,
me.
and it shouldn't.
And that's not.
It shouldn't. It should be about alignment. And here's what I've realized in the last few months is companies have no idea that they can set the standard of compensation for their consultants and their vendors. So I literally was talking to an HR and she's like, yeah, it was the broker's getting paid 10%. And I was like, oh, wow, because that's high. And by the way, commission is a problem. Steph just explained it, right? Premium goes up, commission goes up.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. Fee-based makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Well, they have to answer to the shareholders, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's like choosing alignment. But anyways, in this one instance, she said that the broker told her they couldn't take any less, that the carrier wouldn't let them change it. And it's like, that could not be further from the
BS.
truth. Yeah, that's what I'm actually thinking today. I'm going to record an episode of like crazy shit I've heard in the last 2 months because some of it is absolutely wild. But I think that's amazing advice. Align with your vendors, benchmark them every couple years to make sure you're getting what's best.
I mean, here, I'm sorry.
No, go.
You're like, go girl.
Yeah, go girl, take it.
No. So here's the thing. If your advisor comes to you and has come to you, and I actually wrote an article about this last year.
Okay.
It was, things you should be considering with respect to your healthcare plan. And essentially, if your advisor, broker, whatever we're calling them now, if they're coming to you with the same solutions year after year, you really need to look at who you're partnering with, because to me, you want an organization that is going to work in your company's best interest, not what's in their best interest.
Yeah.
They really should understand your company's mission, vision, value, and align a program that suits those needs.
And not come in with all these shiny value adds.
No.
Like, I can't tell you how many times, oh, well, they have an ERISA attorney that's on call for me. No, they don't. And when you call them, you're only going to get access to them if you have more than 1,000 employees. When you call them, they're going to be too busy for you. You're going to have to wait weeks. And then secondly, when you actually need advice, they're going to say you have to hire your own counsel. Like, we know all these things, or they've got this HR program, or they've got this and this. And it's like, but can they solve your claims problem?
Yeah.
That's really it.
That is it. Because at the end of the day, when someone comes in with, strategic solutions, and I never believed until the last few years that I could have an impact from an HR perspective on the healthcare plan. If they're not coming up with solutions year after year, then again, you really want to partner with someone who does.
That's amazing. So where can our listeners reach out to you? Where's the best place to find you?
So I would say LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And guys, we'll put, obviously, Steph's full name will be in the show notes. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. She is so kind with how she's helping other HRs. She's even helping brokers in the industry trying to get better. She's doing everything that she can to lift this industry up and help employers. So I want to thank you for taking your role so seriously. You are a beacon of light for so many of us, myself included.
Thank you.
Every time I feel discouraged that employers aren't getting it, or we're getting hit, I think about you and I'm like, there's so many good people out here that are doing amazing work, and they're bold and they're not afraid. So thank you.